So that's just it. All right. So we are here to talk about a lot of stuff, mostly
Dearly
coaching
beloved,
stuff. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today, dearly beloved. Now everybody look to your left and look to your right and say Alizé. Hashtag if you know, you know, use the hashtag. Um, Tanner Engstrand is he's a hot topic, pause. He's a name that been hearing a lot about. Now, one of the listeners, Mr. Morale 313, he sent me a podcast yesterday from COVID. Um, and this podcast was Tanner Engstrand on like a USA football podcast or whatever. And this is when he was the offensive coordinator of the DC. God damn it.
DC,
What was it?
I don't
The
know.
DC Dominators?
That sounds kinky.
Pause. I think that's the name of the name of their team. Let me see. DC.
You're good.
I know it wasn't Commanders. Um, maybe hey, maybe we should throw now the same shade at Tanner Engstrand that we throwing
Ben
at Ben
Johnson.
Johnson. Be like, you worked in DC, you bum ass. Nah,
Maybe the DC Defenders.
DC Defenders. There we go. So he was the offensive coordinator at the time in DC. What struck me about him was how he talks offense. Um, we talk about the mind of Ben Johnson. I don't know. I can't sit here and say it's a similar mind, but it's a very, very good mind. Um, when you can just rattle off your concepts and explain your concepts and explain the themes of the concepts and what you're trying to do pre-snap and how you're designing plays so that the quarterback has, he talked about reading the defense with your feet, right? I've never heard that before. But designing like certain aspects of plays into your drops so that, okay, if it's a 3-step drop, your number one is going to be open automatically. And if it's not number one, then the next drop that you take in the direction is going to take you to your number two. And if that's not, you take another hitch and you get to your number three. So you're going through progressions with your footwork. That's a concept that I never really thought about before, right? To build in progressions with footwork. Have you ever seen that or talked about that or has that ever been explained to you before?
Yeah, actually, I believe I watched a video of Tom Brady kind of talking about moving towards that in his older age to help
Mm-hmm.
his arm strength, help him project the ball a little bit further, and it gets you in a throwing stance a bit quicker. Um, I've heard about it before,
Mm-hmm.
and it was from the goat. So yeah, I guess that's kind of good news, huh?
Yeah, there you go. So it came from the GOAT, and he was talking about that. So I mean, he struck me as just a very intelligent offensive mind, who knew what he was talking about. I believe he was responsible for designing the offense in DC. Their season obviously got cut short because of COVID.
Yeah.
So then after that, then that's when he, I believe, came. You say he was the quality control coach, hired by Fatty Matty Patty, and he stayed on. Just like Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson, same thing. He was able to stay on through that regime change. Um, but the thing that you guys were talking about as I was listening in the car, as I had a dude trying to talk to me and I had my earbuds in, I'm like, bruh,
Shout out to you for I appreciate you listening, man.
hey man, all the time, every day. But I'm just like, he's like, hey, busy day for you. I'm like, yeah, it's been busy. Like, you don't see my ears, dog. Like, you know what I'm saying?
That's the worst.
Oh, bruh. Usually people are cool and they don't say nothing.
Yeah.
Just
Some people don't have that awareness.
nah, nah.
I
Be
think
like, dude,
intelligence. I don't even know what to call it, but yeah, some people lack.
yeah. It's social intelligence. I don't know. Just regular awareness. Be like, where was your antennas?
Yeah, exactly. See, I'm doing something.
Exactly. Um, but yeah, so like you guys were talking about him calling plays or
Campbell.
Dan Campbell calling plays. Like, let's delve into. I obviously he has play calling experience. He has play calling experience, and he was at the university. I did pull up an article about that before last night when I was looking at this. He did work with Jim Harbaugh at University of San Diego. All
Yep.
these things kind of cut his teeth with. So I mean, looking at the way that he's come up, looking at the way that he's actually designed an offense, and he's able to teach the concepts. He's able to explain them very clearly. Now, when I was like listening to it and doing something else, and obviously, I don't know, just because I've coached football before or whatever, or played football and taught football, right? Maybe I was able to understand it while not paying full attention, but I felt like that was just the ease in which like how he was teaching it. He was clearly able to get his point across, and it didn't take a whole lot of stuff. Um, so so what do you think would be the drawbacks of someone like this being able to call plays? I mean, for the first time in the NFL.
I think I was more comfortable with Dan Campbell being that play caller. I guess I know I get that he's had that play calling experience in the past. I just think what we have specifically is kind of set up for Jared Goff and
Mhm.
what he can and can't do. And I think Dan Campbell has become very familiar with that. I think Dan Campbell, after that first year with Ben Johnson, kind of forced himself to become familiar with that because the writing was on the wall. This guy was going to become a head coach someday. I mean, and Ben Johnson, and so I think he's had to become immersed in that. And I think it's dope. The thing that leaked this year, not even leaked, Dan Campbell said it himself, was that once a week, he and AG and Ben Johnson would all sit down and kind of just go over like coaching scenarios. I think that was a healthy coaching exercise for Dan Campbell just as much as it was Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson. And I don't know. I just think I have more faith in Dan calling those plays. He did it in 21 with Ben drawing up the plays in the second half. And stats did change. I know we pulled them up in the heavies the other day. I know you listened in the car and whatnot, but it was like 11 touchdowns to 2 interceptions versus beforehand without Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson, like 8 touchdowns to 6 interceptions for JG. I just think it's got to be JG specific. And I think Dan's just more in tune with that. I could be wrong, obviously, and Tanner doesn't have a lot of experience, and that's probably just where I'm at, a little uneasy with that. But I think Dan likes calling plays. And I don't know if he was trolling or not, but like before relinquishing that to Ben, he kind of kept saying he likes calling plays and he wanted to continue calling plays. And it felt like it was kind of tough for him to let that go. But Ben was just such a brilliant mind. And obviously the kid who drew up this stuff that he kind of had to let him go to see his vision all the way through. I think it's going to end up being Dan if it's going to be a Tanner Engstrand. I think Tanner Engstrand could become that play caller at some point in the future, but I feel like it's going to be Dan. That's just my personal feeling about it. What about you?
So before I answer that, before I forget, I know that there were some sources, and one of the sources said apparently that JG to the Saints was pretty much a done deal. Okay, not JG,
Oh
sorry,
my God,
AG.
that source,
Right.
garbage source. Yeah, no, yeah,
So that part wasn't true because he clearly didn't go
correct.
to the States. He went to the Jets.
I already know what you're going to say too. We could talk about it.
That other part,
No,
okay, the
yeah,
rift, is there nothing to that?
nothing to that at all. I like who that source, either that source or the source's source was on some BS and either
Mhm.
trying to drop some stuff. Um, I know very much so. I think you're familiar with it too. After Ben turned down that commander's job, there was a lot of slander going around towards Ben Johnson and his agency because he kind of embarrassed him. They were on their flight to Detroit to visit Ben to try to make him the head coach, and he told them no. So, in retaliation, they kind of rug his name through the mud. Obviously, it didn't
Mhm.
work because Ben is a phenomenal offensive mind and a great play caller, and People covered that in this league, right? JG's a really good quarterback, but Ben help make him look functional. He helped JG look that way. Let's put you that way. So I think if that source was told those things, it came from that type of camp. But obviously, you saw the AG thing didn't come to fruition. That part didn't even make any sense at all to begin with because he was in New York all day. Why would have New Orleans been a done deal? Why would you go to New York if New Orleans was a done deal? Why would you been? That's all BS. There was no friction. Today, Ben Johnson opened up his press conference thanking first Sheila Ford and then Dan Campbell. And Dan Campbell came up multiple times at the press conference because Ben is grateful and thankful for things Ben has taught him. He has coached him up to become a head coach. Ben Johnson came here half the reason because of Dan Campbell. The second half of the reason to win a Super Bowl.
Right. Okay. So I was just making sure
that pissed me off the minute I heard it, man. That made no damn sense. Absolutely no sense.
And the only thing I could think of is the only reason he's saying the Saints is a done deal is because AG left the facility yesterday without signing a contract.
Yeah, but that guy was saying that it was a done deal before then. He was surprised it wasn't announced yesterday. I reached out to my sources on that source to see if there's any truth in any of that, and they say absolutely not.
Yeah.
They almost
so it's not just haterade.
Yeah, no, not just haterade. I mean, that's Spinny's boy, so he's got to look out. But that was trash.
Well, see, what time did the news break? Okay, so for me, it was 6 a.m. So it was right at the start of Armani and Edwards. I was getting ready to go out to work. Mm-hmm. So I heard it after that because I never catch them live because I'm asleep. You know, I never catch Big D because I'm asleep. But pause. What the? Hold on.
Yo.
Hold on. I got. Hey, time out. I never catch that show because I'm asleep, so I don't catch it live.
It broke at 1:43 p.m. Eastern.
Okay. Yeah, so that's about 2 p.m., which would be 6 a.m. for me, right? Yeah. So yeah, I was getting ready to go out to work, and I was like, I'm just not gonna do the AG video. I'll talk about it later. I gotta go to work. But
everyone kind of knows what it is, you know.
Yeah. So I heard it after that, and I was like, why? You know, it just seemed kind of strange. But I knew obviously it wasn't live, but it just seemed strange to come out today. All right. So my opinion about Dan and Tanner. If Tanner becomes the offensive play caller, or if he doesn't become the offensive play caller,
I think he becomes a coordinator. I don't know if he becomes the play caller.
Yeah. But I'm saying if he does become the play caller or not the play caller. Yeah. So my take on it now that I'm thinking about it is why not Dan Campbell calling the plays? Because there's a particular game plan that he has, and every time after a game we would criticize Ben Johnson, he would go to the podium and say Ben called the game exactly the way I wanted him to call it. So if you're gonna do that, if you're gonna have a guy call it exactly the way that you want to call it, why don't you just call it? You know, if he's comfortable with, you know, so here's the other thing. When I was watching the St. Brown Brothers podcast last night, he said, as long as we have Dan, we're good. Right? Because he was like, Dan knows X's and O's. He knows offense. He knows defense. He knows everything. He was like, people just don't understand how smart Dan Campbell is. Yeah. So I think it would marry up with the way that he manages the game for him to be calling the plays. I think we could say it's kind of a natural progression as to what should be going on. Like, okay, we lost Ben Johnson and we're going to keep the same verbiage. We're going to keep everything the same for our offense so that we're hitting the ground running. We're not putting in a new offense, right? So we said this was offense 401 at the beginning of the year. Okay,
Yeah.
well now it's going to be 501. We're not changing things. Obviously, they're going to have some new wrinkles in there when they play against the damn Chicago Bears, um, led by Osama bin Johnson.
Yeah.
But I just feel like it's a natural progression.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be mad either way. I think, like I said, because I've listened to Tanner speak about offense and his philosophy and all these things, obviously his philosophy matches up with the same philosophy that we've had on this offense. You got to run the ball to establish the pass, right? You run the ball, you open up the play action, and that's the way JG's been doing it. That's the way Ben Johnson's been doing it. Dan Kemp, like that's what our philosophy is.
Yep.
I don't care if there's trick plays, right? Because
They're
I mean the
fun.
last
They're
trick
not
play
needed,
was
right?
dumb. Yeah, the last one it was dumb, right? The
Mhm.
other ones worked, but the last one was stupid. And you know, I would rather. Obviously, when it works, it's great. When it doesn't work, it's dumb.
Yeah.
And it's all cool and everything, but that was my one criticism, and I'm not gonna attack Ben Johnson. I've done enough of that. I'm not gonna attack his game plan. Uh the game plan was fine, but what did Dan Campbell tell you? Well, once we started turning the ball over incessantly, we had to get away from what we wanted to do. Yes, Jameer Gibbs was averaging 10 yards a carry in the beginning of the game. Yes, he was doing work. But once now do the people that had a problem with the game plan say you should never have passed the ball with Jared Goff? You should have just, you know,
Yeah.
Jameer
It
should have
drives me
had 50
crazy.
carries.
Well, 'cause here's the thing with all that too, and it
Mhm.
blows my mind. Um, I know as a loss, not a lot of people rewatch losses, especially when it hurts like that. But like we scored on every single possession outside of that first one where we punted the ball, and anytime you
And the
didn't
five we
score,
turned it over.
you turned the ball over. There was nothing wrong with the play calling unless you want to gripe hindsight on the 3rd and 1. But even then, that was a turnover. You survived that down. I guarantee you that's a Monty run on that 4th and 1 or a Jameer Gibbs run on that 4th and 1 that you convert. And maybe that drive ends up being a touchdown. Like the offense was called well. You just turned the ball over. It's so easy when and stuff goes wrong in hindsight to say something like JMO shouldn't have thrown that ball. And I guess, yeah, ultimately you could call the responsibility of that being on Ben Johnson for putting the decision in JMO's hands. But you remember against Chicago at home, Panay, the pass wasn't open. You run it out of bounds. Like
Yeah.
that's how it goes. Everybody loved when Amon Ra threw to Jared Goff. That was even a crazier receiver pass because you're throwing to your damn quarterback. It's like you said, you love it when it works, you hate it when it don't. But like that game, you had 500+ yards of offense. You scored every single time you didn't turn the ball over outside of the very first series. You can't really complain about that. You turn the ball over, and they scored again. The 12 men on the 4th down killed us. You get the ball back, you're down 17 with 7 minutes left. You heard Tom Brady on the broadcast even say it. You shouldn't even be huddling right now. You got no time. You got to get points on the board. And that's why Jameer Gibbs didn't run in the second half. You were down 17 points because you turned the ball over.
Yeah. And even, you know, when I was doing the live stream, I was like, bro, we go down 14-3. We go up 14-3 here. Game's over. You know,
Mhm.
and to that point, nobody had a problem with the way the game was being called.
Yeah.
Right. So you go up 14-3, you still have no problems with the way the game was called. Like I said, ball security. If everything is collapsing around you as a quarterback, you must. And you know, I lost subscribers, but I'm just telling the truth, right?
It's the truth. It's like no one gives a running back excuse for not having blocks when they fumble because you hold on to the ball.
Yeah.
It's your job.
Yeah.
Uh,
Once you looked at Amon Ra and you were startled, like, oh snap, he tripped.
mhm.
Tuck
And
it.
and this is where like by the way, I love JG. I think he's a great guy. I think he's hilarious. Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee multiple times now. and obviously you can win football games with them. But that's what people mean when everything has to be perfect around him, because that pocket collapse on a guy that could. I'm not even talking about a guy, a scrambler, just a guy that could recreate a pocket elsewhere. That's what happens in that situation. Like a Josh Allen, Lamar, or whoever else you want to name, runs out of that situation and the play goes on a little longer. Maybe you still get sacked, but you're not in that situation where the ball's fumbled, And
Mhm.
I mean that's why people say everything needs to be perfect, I guess. But you still win games with him. Obviously, we had a lot of good stuff going on. He's damn there. Stuff is perfect around him. Great offensive line, two great running backs, two great wide receivers. And I think Jamo's gonna elevate even more.
Mhm. I think Jamo's going to come back hungry because I think he's going to internalize that pick.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to be like, "Oh, that was my fault. The game was on me." When even it wasn't on you because you were behind the eight ball because of the previous turnovers that we had.
Yeah,
Um, but that's neither here nor there. Again, so we'll get to the people
we fell in the trap.
to tell them what you guys said about how there were no offensive players saying anything to Ben Johnson.
Yeah,
Nothing.